They called me Slow Claire. They didn't know that the unbreakable system they were so proud to sell to clients was me. And the day they fired me, I took its heart with me. A week after I left, the entire company began to rot from the inside, exactly as I had arranged. My name is Claire Jensen, and this is how I brought down a company with nothing more than a few keystrokes and the blindness of those who thought they knew better. The fluorescent lights in the development room flickered with their usual epileptic rhythm, casting that sickly yellow glow over rows of cluttered desks. Coffee cups grew colonies of mold. Pizza boxes formed geological layers in the corners. The air conditioning wheezed like an asthmatic old man, never quite managing to cut through the smell of stale energy drinks and desperation. I sat in my corner, the farthest cubicle from the windows, where the shadows gathered like old friends. My monitors glowed with lines of code that might as well have been hieroglyphics to most of my colleagues. They preferred their open floor plan near the ping-pong table, where they could high-five over their sick deploys and debate whether React or Vue was the superior framework this week. Me, I preferred the quiet, the darkness, the place where real work happened. "Hey, Claire," Dylan's voice cut through my concentration like a rusty knife. "You coming to the stand-up?" I glanced at the clock. 9:47 a.m. The daily ritual of pretending to care about everyone else's progress while they pretended to understand mine. "Be right there," I said, saving my work. 3,000 lines of Python that would soon become the backbone of our entire data pipeline, though none of them would ever know it. The conference room smelled of burnt coffee and broken dreams. Trevor, our new engineering manager, stood at the whiteboard with his sleeves rolled up just so, his vest unbuttoned in that calculated casual way that screamed, "I read a book about leadership once." "All right, team," he clapped his hands together. "Let's make today count, Dylan. You're up." Dylan launched into his usual performance about refactoring the user interface, using enough buzzwords to fill a Silicon Valley bingo card. I watched Trevor nod along, his perfectly styled hair catching the light. He'd been here 3 months, brought in to optimize our workflow and bring fresh energy to the team. What he'd actually brought was meetings. So many meetings. "Claire," Trevor's voice snapped me back to attention. "Your turn. What are you working on?" "Data pipeline maintenance," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Cleaning up some legacy issues." Trevor's face did that thing it always did when I spoke, a mixture of confusion and irritation, like he'd bitten into a lemon expecting an orange. Right, the legacy stuff. He made a note on his tablet. "We really need to think about modernizing our approach there. Maybe we can sync up later about getting you involved in some of the newer initiatives." Translation: "I don't understand what you do, so it must not be important." "Sure," I said, already knowing that meeting would never happen. After the stand-up, I returned to my corner. The others filtered back to their desks, their voices carrying across the open space. Discussions about weekend plans, complaints about the latest JavaScript framework, debates about whether the office should switch to oat milk. I put on my headphones and dove back into my code. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to learn, was that I'd been building something. For the past 18 months, while they'd been playing architectural astronauts and having their blockchain brainstorming sessions, I'd been creating Spectra. It started small, just a few scripts to automate the mind-numbing data cleanup tasks that ate up my mornings. But it grew, evolved, like a digital organism adapting to its environment. Spectra learned to handle our data flows with an elegance that made our official systems look like stone tools. Every client report that went out on time Spectra, every data anomaly caught before it became a crisis Spectra, every smooth integration with a new vendor system Spectra, wearing the mask of our enterprise solution. I kept it hidden in plain sight. The server hummed away in the corner, labeled System Monitor, Do Not Touch. The commits went to a private repository, disguised as configuration updates. The cron jobs ran silent in the night, keeping our data flowing like blood through digital veins. "Claire's doing her legacy cleanup again," I heard someone say, followed by chuckles. Let them laugh. While they were debating whether to use tabs or spaces, I was building the thing that kept their paychecks coming. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday. Trevor scheduled a team alignment session, corporate speak for "I'm about to make your life worse." We gathered in the large conference room, The one with the motivational posters about innovation and teamwork. Trevor stood at the front with a PowerPoint that looked like it had been vomited out by a consulting firm. So, I've been doing a deep dive into our technical infrastructure, he began, clicking to a slide full of boxes and arrows that meant nothing, and I've identified some areas where we can really level up. My stomach tightened. When managers started talking about leveling up, someone was about to get leveled. I'm excited to announce Project Ripple. He clicked again, revealing a timeline that would have made Gant himself weep. We're going to completely rebuild our data pipeline from the ground up, using cutting-edge cloud-native solutions. The room buzzed with the nervous energy of people who knew they were about to have their work lives disrupted but couldn't say so. Now, I know some of you have been maintaining our current systems for a while. Trevor's eyes found me in the back row. And we appreciate that, but it's time to move forward. Claire, I'm going to need you to focus on documenting the existing system so our new team can understand what needs to be replaced. Documentation, the kiss of death in our industry. When they ask you to document your code, they're asking you to dig your own grave. Of course, I said, my voice betraying nothing. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk through a haze of whispered conversations. The vultures were already circling. About time we modernized, Dylan said to anyone who would listen. That old system is held together with duct tape and prayers. If only he knew. The old system he mocked was a shell, a facade. The real system, Spectra, purred along underneath, invisible and irreplaceable. I spent the next 2 weeks writing documentation, page after page of technical specifications, system diagrams, and process flows, all of it true, in the way that a skeleton is a true representation of a human body. The bones were there, but the life was missing. Trevor reviewed it with the kind of glazed expression I'd come to expect. He understood maybe 10% of what I'd written, but he nodded along, making notes about knowledge transfer and technical debt. This is great, Claire, he said during one of our one-on-ones. Really helpful. I think this will make the transition much smoother. Transition. There it was. Transition, I asked, though I already knew. Trevor shifted in his chair, suddenly fascinated by his coffee cup. Well, yes. I mean, once we have the new system in place, we'll need to restructure the team around our new tech stack. Your skills are valuable, but they're a bit legacy-focused. Legacy, in tech, that's another word for obsolete, for disposable. I see, I said. It's nothing personal, he rushed to add, as if that made it better. We'll make sure you have time to upskill, maybe transition to a documentation role full-time, or leave. That was the unspoken option. I nodded, smiled even. I understand. When do you need the documentation finished? End of the month would be great. That gives the new team time to review before they start the build. The new team, already hired, apparently, already waiting in the wings to replace what they thought I'd built. I went back to my desk and opened my private repository. 18 months of work stared back at me. Thousands of hours. Millions of lines of code. The real heart of our operation. They wanted documentation. I'd give them documentation. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the model employee. I arrived early, stayed late, and produced documentation that would have made a technical writer weep with joy. I mapped out every system, every process, every integration point. Except for Spectra. Spectra didn't exist in the documentation. As far as the official record was concerned, our data pipeline was exactly what it appeared to be, a creaking collection of scheduled jobs and manual processes, held together by hope and regular human intervention. I documented the shell and left out the ghost. The meeting came on a Friday, because of course it did. HR loved firing people on Fridays. It gave them the weekend to avoid awkward encounters. Claire, thanks for joining us, said Janet from HR, her smile as plastic as her nails. Trevor sat beside her, looking everywhere but at me. The conference room felt smaller than usual. The motivational posters on the walls, teamwork makes the dream work, seemed to mock the situation. I'll cut to the chase, Janet continued, sliding a folder across the table. We're restructuring the engineering department to align with our new technical direction. Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. Eliminated, like I was a bug in the code. We want to thank you for your contributions. Trevor finally spoke, his voice hitting that corporate sympathy note that made my skin crawl. Your documentation has been invaluable in helping us plan the transition. I opened the folder. Severance package, 2 weeks' pay, health insurance through the end of the month, a standard non-disclosure agreement. We'll need you to turn in your laptop and badge today, Janet said. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Security, after 3 years of keeping their systems running, I needed a guard to make sure I didn't steal a stapler. Of course, I said, signing the papers. Can I have a few minutes to clean up my desk? I'm afraid not. Janet's smile tightened. Security will collect your personal items and have them sent to you. They'd learned from somewhere that the dangerous moment was between firing and leaving, the moment when a disgruntled employee might delete something important. If only they knew I'd already deleted everything that mattered. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral procession. Mark from security, a nice enough guy who always complained about the coffee, stayed 2 steps behind me, trying to look professional rather than embarrassed. We passed my old desk. My monitors were already dark. My chair pushed in for the last time. In the corner, the old server hummed along, still labeled, System Monitor, Do Not Touch. They'd touch it eventually, and when they did... Sorry about this, Claire, Mark muttered as we waited for the elevator. You know how it is. I do, I said, and I did. The elevator doors closed on 3 years of my life, 3 years of being underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued. 3 years of building something beautiful in the shadows while they played their corporate games in the light. They wanted their new system. They could have it. The first email came the following Monday. My personal phone buzzed with a notification from my old work email. Somehow still receiving forwards despite my terminated access. Urgent data pipeline issues, read the subject line. I deleted it without reading. Tuesday brought 3 more emails, each more frantic than the last. By Wednesday, my LinkedIn was lighting up with connection requests from former colleagues. I ignored them all. Thursday, Trevor called. I let it go to voicemail. Hey, Claire, it's Trevor. Hope you're doing well, eh? Quick question about the documentation. We're having some issues with the overnight processing jobs, and we can't seem to find the scripts that run them. Could you give me a call back, thanks? The scripts. Of course they couldn't find them. They were looking in the official repositories, the documented systems, the places where good little engineers were supposed to keep their code. They weren't looking in the shadow system that actually ran everything. They weren't looking for Spectra because Spectra didn't exist in their world. Friday brought panic. Even from my apartment, I could feel it. The LinkedIn messages became desperate. The emails, now forwarded by friends still at the company, painted a picture of beautiful chaos. Client reports weren't generating. Data imports were failing. The dashboards that executives love to refresh during board meetings showed nothing but error messages. And somewhere in that gleaming office, Trevor was learning what legacy system really meant. I spent the weekend setting up my new company, Genseno Consulting. A little on the nose, perhaps, but I enjoyed the symmetry, business license, bank accounts, the whole corporate dance. This time, though, I was leading. Monday morning, while my former team was presumably pulling their hair out over missing cron jobs, I was having coffee with Robert Chen from Vanderton Analytics. We've heard impressive things about your work, Robert said, sliding a contract across the table. We need someone who really understands data infrastructure, someone who can build us something special. Special? I smiled at that. I have something in mind, I said. A system I've been designing. I call it Spectra. Interesting. Tell me more. So I did. I told him about autonomous data pipelines that self-healed and self-optimized, about intelligent processing that could adapt to new data sources without human intervention, about a system so elegant it practically ran itself. When can you start? He asked when I finished. Today, I said. The contract was generous, more than generous. It turned out that when people actually valued your work, they were willing to pay for it. I built Spectra 2.0 for Vanderton in 6 weeks, not because I was rushing, but because I'd already built it once. This time, though, I built it in the light, every line documented, every function explained, every process transparent. It was beautiful. The news of my former company's struggles filtered through the industry grapevine. Trevor's LinkedIn quietly removed his engineering manager title. The new team he'd hired discovered what everyone discovers when they try to replace something they don't understand. Sometimes the old way was the only way that worked. I heard they tried to hire consultants to fix it, spent tens of thousands trying to reconstruct what I'd built from the documentation I'd left, like archaeologists trying to raise the dead with nothing but pottery shards. The final email came 3 months later. Trevor again, but this time from a personal address. Claire, I hope this finds you well. I wanted to apologize for how things ended at the company. I realize now that I didn't fully understand or appreciate the complexity of what you'd built. The board has asked me to reach out to see if you'd consider coming back as a consultant to help us resolve some ongoing issues. We're prepared to offer very competitive rates. Please let me know if you'd be interested in discussing this. I read it twice, then archived it. Not deleted, archived. Some trophies are worth keeping. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of Pinot Noir, watching the city lights flicker like neurons in a vast digital brain. Somewhere out there, in a building I'd never enter again, servers were failing and systems were crashing. They'd called me Slow Claire, said I was legacy-focused, old-fashioned, out of touch with modern development. They were right about one thing. I was focused on legacy. The legacy you leave behind. The legacy that keeps running when you're gone. The legacy that teaches its own lessons in the silence of your absence. My phone buzzed. Robert from Vanderton, sending charts of their improved performance since Spectra 2.0 went live. 30% faster processing, 50% fewer errors, client satisfaction through the roof. Whatever we're paying you, his message read, it's not enough. I smiled and took another sip of wine. They never did read my commit messages at the old job, but now, every missing line of code was teaching them the lesson that no one else could teach. In the end, you don't need bullets or bombs to bring down a tower. Sometimes all you need is to remove the right stone from the foundation and let gravity do the rest. They wanted to eliminate my position sign, but they never asked what else would be eliminated when I left. The answer was everything. Everything that mattered was me. And when they threw me away, they threw away the very thing they thought they were improving. I raised my glass to the night sky, to the servers groaning under the weight of their ignorance, to the beauty of systems that only reveal their importance when they're gone. Here's to being slow, I whispered. Slow and steady and absolutely essential. Somewhere across the city, Trevor was probably still refreshing his inbox, hoping for a reply that would never come. Still searching for backups that didn't exist. Still trying to understand how one quiet woman in the corner had been holding it all together. But understanding would come too late. It always does for people who confuse noise with progress, who mistake confidence for competence, who think that legacy is just another word for replaceable. I closed my eyes and listened to the city hum, somewhere in that electronic symphony. Spectra 2.0 was working its magic for people who appreciated it, and somewhere else, the absence of Spectra 1.0 was teaching its own brutal lesson. They'd wanted documentation I'd given them everything they needed to understand the system they thought they had. It wasn't my fault they never asked about the system that actually existed. The wine finished. I stood and stretched. Tomorrow brought new challenges, new systems to build, new problems to solve. But tonight, I allowed myself this moment of satisfaction. Not revenge, exactly, just the natural consequences of willful blindness. The inevitable result of dismissing what you don't understand. They called me Slow Claire, but in the end, I was the only one fast enough to see the crash coming. And the only one smart enough to be somewhere else when it happened. The city sparkled below, indifferent and eternal. I gave it one last look, then went inside. There was code to write, systems to build, and a reputation to cement. The kind of reputation that meant never being called slow again. The kind that meant never being eliminated. The kind that meant being the one who decides what stays and what goes. In my home office, 3 monitors waited, their glow familiar and welcoming. I sat down, cracked my knuckles, and began to type. Somewhere, Trevor's inbox remained empty. Somewhere, Servers struggled with loads they couldn't process. Somewhere, a company learned that the difference between running and falling is often just one person, one quiet person in the corner, doing the work that nobody else understood. They'd eliminated my position. But positions were just titles, just words on an org chart. What they couldn't eliminate was the knowledge in my head, the systems I'd built, the elegant solutions that had become load-bearing walls in their digital house. My fingers flew across the keyboard, building something new for people who saw value where others saw only legacy. Each line of code was a small revolution, a quiet declaration that competence couldn't be org-charted away. The night grew deep, but I wasn't tired. For the first time in 3 years, I was building something for people who understood what they had. And that made all the difference. Let them figure out their pipeline issues. Let them hire consultants and new teams and whatever else they thought would fix the problem. Let them learn, slowly and painfully, that some things can't be replaced just because you've decided they're old. I had better things to do than watch them burn. I had systems to build, beautiful, elegant systems that would run so smoothly their owners would never know how complex they truly were. That was the real revenge, in the end, not the chaos I'd left behind, but the success I'd found beyond it, not the systems that failed without me, but the ones that thrived because of me. They'd called me Slow Claire, but I'd always been exactly as fast as I needed to be. Fast enough to build what they needed before they knew they needed it. Fast enough to take it with me when they decided they didn't. And fast enough to build something better for someone who deserved it. The code flowed like water, like music, like poetry, line after line of digital architecture, rising from nothing into something beautiful. This was what I was meant to do, not in some dark corner, undervalued and overlooked, but here in my own space, building for people who understood the difference between slow and thorough, between legacy and foundational. My phone buzzed one more time. Another LinkedIn request from someone at the old company. I turned it face down without looking. That chapter was closed, written, edited, and published. Let them read it over and over, searching for the happy ending that was never there. I had new chapters to write, new systems to build, new problems to solve for people who wouldn't call me slow. The monitors glowed, the code compiled, the future unfolded one function at a time. And somewhere in a building I'd never enter again. Trevor hit refresh on his email one more time, hoping for a miracle that wasn't coming. But miracles were for people who believed in magic. I believed in code, in systems, in the quiet power of knowing how things really work. And that belief had set me free. The wine glass sat empty on my desk, catching the monitor light like a prism. I looked through it at the code beyond, distorted but still recognizable, still mine. They could take my badge, my laptop, my desk in the corner, but they couldn't take what mattered. They couldn't take the knowledge, the skill, the understanding of how to make data dance and systems sing. They couldn't take Spectra, because Spectra had never been theirs to take. And now, in the quiet of my own office, building for people who valued what I could do, I finally understood something. I'd never been slow. I'd just been waiting for the right moment to show them what fast really looked like. And that moment had finally come. The code flowed, the night deepened, the city hummed its electric lullaby. And Claire Jensen, no longer slow, no longer dismissed, no longer eliminated, built something beautiful in the glow of her monitors. Built it right. Built it fast. Built it for people who understood its worth. The way it should have been all along. In the end, that was better than any revenge, better than watching them fail, better than their desperate emails and panicked phone calls. In the end, success was the only response worth giving. And success, it turned out, was exactly as fast as it needed to be. No slower. No faster. Just right. Just perfect. Just mine. The code compiled successfully. No errors, no warnings, just clean, elegant logic, ready to solve real problems for real people who really understood its value. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. They'd called me Slow Claire. But names, like positions, were just words. And words, like code, only had the power you gave them. I gave mine power. Real power. The kind that built things. The kind that lasted. The kind that mattered. And that was all the speed I'd ever needed. All the speed I'd ever have. All the speed that counted in the end. The monitors glowed. The code waited. The future beckoned. And Claire Jensen, fast enough at last, answered its call. One keystroke at a time. One system at a time. One success at a time. Until the only thing slow was the realization, somewhere in a failing company, that they'd eliminated the wrong position. But by then, it was far too late. The code was written. The system was built. And slow Claire was just a memory, replaced by something far more powerful. A woman who knew her worth and built accordingly. That was the real lesson hidden in the missing code, the truth encrypted in the absent documentation, the message in the empty repositories. Value what you have before it's gone. Understand what you're eliminating before you eliminate it. And never, ever underestimate the quiet ones in the corner. Because sometimes they're not just maintaining the system. Sometimes they are the system. And when they leave, they take everything with them. Everything that matters. Everything that works. Everything. The thought made me smile as I typed, building something new for people who'd never make that mistake. People who understood that slow and steady didn't just win the race. Sometimes, slow and steady was the only one running. And in the silence of my home office, with the city sleeping around me and the code flowing beneath my fingers, I ran. Not away from anything. Toward something better. Something deserved. Something mine. The monitors glowed their welcome. The keyboard sang its rhythm. The code built its beauty line by line. And somewhere, an inbox refreshed again, empty as the understanding of those who'd sent me away. But that was their problem now. I had better things to build. Better places to be. Better people to build for. The wineglass caught the light one more time before I moved it aside, making room for more important things. Like the future. Like the code. Like the simple satisfaction of being valued for what you could do. Not dismissed for what they couldn't understand. That was worth more than any amount of schadenfreude, worth more than watching them fail, worth more than their desperate attempts to undo what couldn't be undone. It was worth everything. And it was mine. All mine. Finally. Completely. Forever. The code flowed on, building tomorrow one function at a time, building better, building right. Building for people who would never call me slow. And that made all the difference in the world. All the difference that mattered. All the difference I'd ever need. The city slept. The code compiled. The future waited. And Claire Jensen, no longer slow, no longer eliminated, no longer anyone's legacy problem, built it with steady hands and clear eyes. Built it the way it should be built. With patience. With skill. With the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how fast she needed to be. And not one keystroke faster. That was the real lesson, in the end. Not that they'd failed without me, but that I'd succeeded without them. Not that they'd been wrong to let me go, but that I'd been right to let them. Not that they'd called me slow, but that I'd proved them wrong in the only way that mattered. By being exactly as fast as success required. No more. No less. Just right. Just perfect. Just me. The thought warmed me more than the wine as I coded through the night, building something beautiful for people who deserved it. People who understood that sometimes the best code was the code you never saw. The code that worked so well you forgot it was there. The code that only announced itself when it was gone. Like I had. Like Spectra had. Like everything they'd thought was replaceable until they tried to replace it. But those were their lessons to learn now. Their problems to solve. Their emails to send to an inbox that would never reply. I had better things to do. Better code to write. Better systems to build. And I would build them at exactly the right speed. The speed of someone who knew her worth. The speed of someone who'd found her place. The speed of someone who'd never be eliminated again. Because positions could be eliminated. But knowledge, skill. The ability to build something from nothing and make it sing. That was forever. That was mine. That was all the speed I'd ever need. The monitors glowed their steady light. The keyboard waited for the next command. The future stretched out like an unwritten function, full of possibility. And I wrote it one line at a time, one system at a time, one success at a time. No faster than necessary. No slower than perfect. Just right. Just me. Just the way it should have been all along. The wine glass sat empty, but I was full of purpose, full of possibility, full of the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing your worth and building accordingly. Let them call me whatever they wanted. I knew what I was. I was the builder, the creator, the one who made things work. And that was faster than any title they could give or take away. Faster than any position they could eliminate. Faster than any system they could try to replace. It was the speed of competence, the velocity of value, the acceleration of ability finally recognized and properly rewarded. And it felt perfect. Absolutely, completely, utterly perfect. Like code that compiled on the first try. Like systems that ran without intervention. Like the quiet satisfaction of watching something you built do exactly what it was supposed to do. That was my speed now. The speed of success on my own terms. And I would never be slow again. Not because I'd gotten faster, but because I'd found people who understood that my speed had always been exactly right. People who valued what I built more than how fast I built it. People who understood that sometimes slow was just another word for thorough. Another word for careful. Another word for right. And right, in the end, was the only speed that mattered. The only speed that lasted. The only speed worth having. I typed on through the night, building tomorrow one careful keystroke at a time, building it right, building it well, building it for people who understood its value. And in the silence between keystrokes, I heard it. The sound of a system running perfectly. The sound of code executing flawlessly. The sound of success measured not in speed but in substance. It was beautiful. It was mine. It was exactly as fast as it needed to be. And that was perfect. Absolutely. Finally. Forever perfect. Just like the code I was writing. Just like the future I was building. Just like the speed I'd always had. Finally recognized for what it was. Not slow. Not fast. Just right. The way it had always been. The way it would always be. The way it should be. Forever and always. One keystroke at a time. One line at a time. One perfect moment at a time. Building something better than revenge. Building success. Building proof that they'd been wrong about everything except one thing. I was focused on legacy. The legacy of building things that lasted. The legacy of code that ran forever. The legacy of being invaluable rather than eliminated. And that legacy would run long after their systems failed, their emails went unanswered, and their understanding came too late. It would run at exactly the right speed. My speed. The speed of someone who knew that slow and steady didn't just win the race. Sometimes, slow and steady was the only one who knew there was a race at all. And by the time the others figured it out, the race was already over. Won by the one they'd called too slow to matter. Won by the one they'd eliminated. Won by the one who'd taken everything with her when she left. Everything that mattered. Everything that worked. Everything they'd never understood until it was gone. But that was their race to lose now. I had my own to run. At my own speed. In my own way. For people who understood that sometimes the fastest thing you could do was take your time and do it right. People who understood that slow was just another word for unstoppable. And I was unstoppable now. Unstoppable and building. Building and succeeding. Succeeding and proving with every line of code that they'd eliminated the wrong thing. They'd eliminated a position. But they'd kept the problem. And I'd become the solution. The solution they couldn't have. The solution they'd thrown away. The solution now building better things for better people at exactly the right speed. My speed. The only speed that mattered. The only speed that won. The speed of knowing your worth and never accepting less. That was my velocity now. And it was perfect. Absolutely. Completely forever perfect. Just like the code glowing on my screens. Just like the future building beneath my fingers. Just like the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where I belonged. At last. At my speed. At peace. The monitors glowed their welcome. The code flowed its promise. The night wrapped around me like an old friend. And I built, and built, and built. At exactly the right speed. Forever. The empty wine glass caught the light one last time as I reached for it, ready to celebrate another successful compile. Another step forward. Another proof that speed was relative, but competence was absolute. They'd called me Slow Claire. But I'd always just been Claire. Claire who built things. Claire who made things work. Claire who knew that the best revenge wasn't making them fail. It was succeeding without them. And I was succeeding now. One line at a time. One system at a time. One perfect moment at a time. At exactly the right speed. My speed. The only speed that mattered in the end.